Let's talk about life and love and information. Let's talk about life and let's talk about love.
Good morning. This is Beverly Harity broadcasting from beautiful St. Petersburg, Florida. We have a very interesting broadcast today. So much has been going on in the city that may alter our beautiful emerald green parks along the shoreline. So we're going to talk about that. And somehow I'm going to work it into doggy parks because parks are so vitally important to St. Petersburg and every other community. So we're going to talk about parks and we're going to talk about dog parks. First, I want to thank Joe over at UPS, being my primary sponsor for a long time now. He's been wonderful. UPS is a wonderful business in St. Pete. It's a full-service business. They do just about anything you would need to supplement or complement your businesses, either at home or in a bricks and mortar. They have notary. You can get a post office box. You can buy all your supplies. They have wonderful greeting cards. And of course, you can fax if you need to. You just name it. And UPS on 2nd and 2nd South will do it for you. And now they're also open on Sunday. So think about when you need. Don't wait the last minute to ship, especially with the holidays coming up. And they're not coming up, but in a way they are. Things are moving so fast. Anyway, thank you, UPS on 2nd and 2nd North. Really appreciate your support. So, for the love of dogs, we've been talking a long time now. All the current shows are about dogs. The one that just skyrocketed in listening was Doggy Dads. So we're going to take a look at what made Doggy Dads such a great show. And I suspect it was the guests. And of course the subject. There's a lot of Doggy Dads out there. I had them on my show, of course, but I could have done 10 shows on Doggy Dads because everywhere I go, I see a Doggy Dad. And they're really good dads. So kind of a interesting take on, nurturing from another perspective. Okay, I spent a lot of time doing research the last couple of days in between my advocacy for saving Spa Beach Park, which desperately needs to be saved. And the research was about the parks. I started with dog parks. And then I decided to, go into Pinellas County. I just wanted to see what the lay of the land is. Now, I know all about the parks along St. Pete waterfront. I joined the Downtown Waterfront Parks Foundation to help protect them because they were so pristine. And I'm going to go back a little bit in time with you and talk about earlier parks in an earlier time in a different place, of course. And that's the parks in Chicago, Illinois, where I was born and raised. I'm a third or fourth generation Chicagoan. And there was a huge battle. The history is full of these battles to preserve waterfront from industrialization. And Chicago did it, of course, way before St. Pete. And Burnham was the man that led the battle. And they were trying to industrialize the whole waterfront. And he said, no, no, no. And he had enough money and enough supporters to go to war over the development of the city, especially along the waterfront. And of course he won. Chicago is famous, beyond famous, for their fabulous parks. they're famous for their fabulous parks. As a matter of fact, they've gotten the nickname of the Emerald Necklace because they're strung along the waterfront in an arch, a gentle arch, all the way from, if you include the suburbs, all the way up from Wisconsin to Indiana. But in Chicago, they're specifically beautiful. And one of the things makes them beautiful is, first of all, they don't allow any development. Of course, there's parks, benches, there's gardens, but nothing commercial is developed there, and nothing. When they do have something, they do have art. It's scaled to size. It's appropriate. It's in the right place. It's usually statuary. But they allow the parks to speak for themselves. They're beautiful. There's a big budget for gardening. There's gardens all along and within many of the parks, especially the ones along the fountain, in downtown near Monroe Harbor. There's fabulous gardens there. So Chicago's been very, very proud of their parks for as long as I've lived there and before. But it came at a price of a lot of conflict, a lot of ill will, a lot of battles, a lot of trauma. And this included the other aspect that I think is interesting to note is that they found that the Chicago River flows into Lake Michigan. It did flow into Lake Michigan, and it was bringing a lot of contamination to the lake. So another thing that's happening in St. Pete is, of course, we're all concerned about the contamination, of our harbors and our waterfront due to sewage. So we can look to Chicago and see what kinds of things they did. One of the things Chicago did was considered one of the greatest engineering feats of its time is they reversed the flow of water. They built a set of locks. The river is higher. I think it's higher than I'm not sure anymore. I'll have to check that out. Anyway, they're not at equal heights, let me put it that way. And anyway, what they did is reverse the flow of the river so it didn't flow into the lake anymore. And the other thing they did concurrent with this was build a sanitarium. There's a sanitarium at Fullerton and the lakefront, Fullerton Avenue. If you cross over that bridge, if you're familiar with the city, there's a crossover over the Outer Drive. And not far from where I lived. And it's now a playhouse. But years and years ago, it was a sanitarium for children who had TB. And they were all in hammocks. It was thought if they could get fresh air and be by fresh air, of course, they would heal faster, which is actually true. So there's a history of protecting not only the parks and the water, but the children too. So you have to think about this because it is it all goes together. People, water, green, nature. And to do anything to contaminate that is completely appalling to me, especially in our city, St. Petersburg, where the city charter demands so many parks be passive. Passive means you can't develop them. And if you put something on them, it can only be for a short period of time, like a volleyball net or something like that. Something modest and of short duration. Well, passive parks, there's a reason there's passive parks. And in the heart of St. Pete, in the heart of the waterfront, the city is attempting to change our passive park, Spa Beach Park, to active, meaning it can be developed. Meaning specifically, the driver behind this is to install a huge, oversized, neon-colored fishnet, hairnet kind of item. I don't even want to call it art anymore because so many people don't think it is. But the thing that is worse about that is that it's on 8-story tall support structures. And it's permanent. So the whole motive to change Spa Park from passive to active is so this can be built. Now there's something seriously, seriously wrong with the premise right there. And I want to share with you that was not the original place. They wanted to put it on the pier. And the FAA and other factors involved said, no, you can't put it here. Now we're talking about something the size of a football field. So they look around, they don't think, they don't do any feasibility studies, they don't talk to any planners, they don't discuss it with anybody, they go into a covert operation. In other words, everything now is on the down low. They're going to put it on Spa Park, even though they know Spa Park is a passive park. So there's something terribly, terribly wrong with this kind of corruption, and it is corruption. It also speaks of something called self-will, that I want what I want, when I want, when I want it, which sounds a little bit like Trump, doesn't it? Anyway, I won't go on a tangent. I can feel myself getting there. But I want to talk to you about the parks, and this has raised the issue tremendously for me. I moved here because the parks in St. Pete are like a little mini emerald necklace. It reminded me very much of Chicago. There were the high-rises, there were the parks, then there were harbors, and then there was the water. It was very much like a mini Lincoln Park in Chicago, and I'm from Lincoln Park. Anyway, doggy parks. Sorry, folks, but I feel strongly about this, very strongly. And if you do too, there is a group formed on Facebook. It's called Save Spa Beach Park, SAVE, Spa, SPA, Beach Park. And please join us. Within 3 days, we have over 250 people. Everyone is upset. Why are they upset? Because this is the first time most people are hearing about this. It's been cleverly concealed, and that's another problem I'm having with this whole initiative. The sneakiness, if you will, and the spinning of how it presents and the images they send that don't have 8-story tall structures in them. It's very deceptive. It's been very deceptive. And I'm ashamed of that. So, speaking of dogs and parks, I walked my little Miss Nina when she was alive. God bless my little buddy. One of our favorite nighttime walks was along the waterfront by North Straw Park. And she loved it. That was one of her favorite walks. And often we would walk from the public bathroom. I forgot what it's called already. But the end of Museum of Fine Arts all the way to Vinoy Park. And that would be our nighttime walk. And we did it a lot in the summer because neither of us could tolerate the heat. She was very heat intolerant. Little Shih Tzus are heat intolerant. They have no snout, so they have no way of cooling the air. So she was about 4 inches off the ground. Most Shih Tzus are maybe 6 to 10 inches off the ground. But the heat steaming up from the sidewalks goes right into their nose and right to their system. So they can get overheated very quickly. But at night she came alive. And, that was great because it was gorgeous there. We would walk along there. We would look at the shoreline. We would look at the stars and the moonrise and all these wonderful things. We would go very early in the morning, watch the sunrise. But this was one of the things we did on a regular basis. I also went to other parks, but that was her favorite park at night. And another thing we could do, and from that park we could just cross the street and sit in oh, I can't remember I'll think of the name of them in a minute. And we would sit and I'd have a drink. And it was a doggy-friendly place, and it was the only place that was open. I know I'll think of it after the show. But it was wonderful and friendly, and there were a lot of people enjoying beautiful nights. So it was Tryst, Tryst. So I'm plugging Tryst right now because there were many of us that were there at night. I remember Gabriella came with her little doggy, and it was just a relaxing summer night in St. Pete, very convivial. So that's my strongest memory of this, of North Straw Park and the waterfront. Other days we would go to Vinoy. During the day, Vinoy Park was Miss Nina's favorite. We would sit on the bench. We'd watch the dolphins. We would watch the birds. If you sat there, you'd be long enough, you'd be amazed at how much wildlife appeared. And sometimes fishermen would come by. It was a beautiful, beautiful spot. We went to Whitted Park often. We'd go on Deming's Landing. We'd go to South Straw Park. We would go to North Shore Park. We walked the parks all the time. All the time at all different times of the day and the year. And over the last year, 6 months, I would say, each and every one of those parks now has been monetized. There were weekends where we could not go to the park because of all the commercialization. The fairs, the car shows, the this, the that, all the hustle. So these beautiful parks became commercial enterprises. And that was very unattractive. I was told in the past they would sort of regulate how many parks could have events in them over the years. It wasn't every park every day on the waterfront, but it is now. So the parks are already being contaminated, if you will, or less than, or having their natural elements destroyed. So I don't like the fact that I can't walk out through my beautiful parks without being hustled, without having some commercial enterprise going on, or some music thing that has 8,000 vendors in it. But the point is, the natural beauty isn't there because of commercialization. They also have neon signs now on Mojave parking garage. I mean, what's up with that? More monetization, more commercialization. It's discouraging. It's not what Chicago would ever do. They would have an occasional event, obviously, but they wouldn't cram every waterfront park with events all year long. Why are we doing it? Are we that broke? I'm really concerned about this. So walking along, Vinoy Basin was one of our favorite walks. But I do want to remember that this show, we're 20 minutes into the show, and I do want to shift gears. I apologize, but I'm speaking my heart right now, and I feel very strongly about this. And by the way, if you care to join us, you can join us 3 o'clock Thursday, July 12th at 3 o'clock at City Hall. There's a group of us going to beg on our knees if we have to stop changing Spa Beach Park from passive to active. Stop it. Just stop it. Come to your senses and stop this insanity, because this is the toe in the door, and we all know that. You certainly must know that. And Do we have to monetize everything that's beautiful in the city? What's up with that? It's scary in a way. We have our waters befouled by sewer water. That was originally to monetize something. Do you know they were actually thinking of creating a fish farm there? I mean, you have to think of some of the crazy ideas. And there, people in Chicago, I've talked about this with my friends. They said, "You've got to be kidding me." It's incredulous. And why are we so myopic here? Why can't we see the bigger picture? Why can't we see that the gorgeous natural emerald necklace that St. Pete has shouldn't be contaminated, shouldn't be adorned with neon-colored stuff? One person called it the neon-colored hairnet. Please, 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 let's stop this insanity. Okay, I'm going to take a break for a minute, gather my wits. I'm changing gears. We're going to talk about parks, doggy parks specifically. Okay? Be right back.
Let's talk about life. Let's have a little conversation. Let's talk about life. And love and information. Let's talk about life. And let's talk about love.
Okay, I'm back. I can feel my throat going, but that's okay. It's allergies. I've taken my allergy meds, so there's not a lot else I can do. I've been inside so much, I feel like I might as well be living on the moon instead of this beautiful Florida. So parks. The first thing I did, I want to talk about, well, I'll tell you that at the end. The first thing I did was go to Pinellas County because when I researched parks, St. Petersburg area, one of the links that came up was Pinellas County. So I started looking at parks, and I have to admit, had I known how beautiful some of these parks were, I knew about a lot of them, but not all of them, I would have gotten in my car and taken Miss Nina to many other parks. We did that once in a while, but not as much as now that I see some of these parks. It would have been a drive, but I think it would have been a nice drive. So Pinellas County has 7 parks. And, they're beautiful, they're gorgeous. I'm going to list them for you. First, I'm going to encourage you to go to St. Petersburg, Florida City website. And there they will have, through Parks and Recreation, if you click that link, you will find everything you need to know about the parks. I'm not happy with some of the photos. I think the photos could have been more powerful from a marketing standpoint. But and maybe they'll upgrade them or do something a little more. I mean, it doesn't cost a dime to pop a video in nowadays. But anyway, it's adequate, but it doesn't dazzle you. But at least you get all the information you need, and you get a sense of the parks and the services that the parks have. And the same goes with Pinellas County. Now in Tarpon Springs, of course, everything is, they try to do it alphabetically because there are some parks that are such wows, but they try to be democratic about listing them. This is Anderson Park, and Anderson Park looks lovely. It's in Tarpon Springs. In Seminole, we had Boca Ciega Park, which looked lovely too. Largo had 2 parks, Eagle Lake Park and Walshingham Park, and I've taken Nina to Walshingham Park. It's big. It's very natural. It's lovely. There's no contamination. There's no outrageous art. It's just a gorgeous park. Then we have Eagle Lake. Oh, that was Eagle Lake Park and Washington Park are in Largo. In Clearwater, there's Sand Key Park. It didn't look too exciting, but it was. All these parks are beautiful. They're natural. They're not. The things that are built on them are like shelters and things you would see in a park. Palm Harbor had Chestnut Park, which I have been to, so it's a lovely park. And of course, the gem of all the Pinellas County parks is Fort DeSoto Park, and it's in Terra Verde. And one of the things Fort DeSoto Park has is the best doggy park, I guess, in the country. It won some sort of an award, and here's why. First of all, it's got two elements to it. It's got the beach, and then it's got the actual, like all the other parks, it's got the wired, structured chain link parks for big dogs and little dogs, and that's the way almost all of them are. It's got water. Fort DeSoto, it's also got a shower for the sand, so you can rinse off your dog and try to get as much sand off your dog as possible. And then, of course, the beach, and there's a section where dogs are permitted. And in my experience with Miss Nina, she loved the beach. She hated the water. I could not get her in the water. So I just assumed she had an experience before I rescued her. It had something to do with water and terrified her. And I don't fight that. I just say, okay, we won't go in the water. So those are the parks in Pinellas County. We're lucky to have so many beautiful parks. We're lucky. And the reason cities, counties, countries designate parkland is for the same reason St. Pete is designated in our charter, passive parks. They don't want them contaminated. And I think it takes a lot of aggression and hostility to try to change a passive park to an active park just because somebody wants it. It's just insane. That's really a definition of insanity to me, and I know what I'm talking about. Okay, so I know I said I'd get off the subject. I'm sorry, people, if you don't like it, link out. But here I am. It's my show, right? Now we're talking about St. Pete parks. These are doggy parks now. And there's 6 of them. And I found out something else interesting, that St. Pete also offers canine classes. So the canine classes are in Azalea Park, Bay Vista Park, J.W. Cate, C-A-T-E Park, Shore Acres, and Willis St. John. Anyway, it would have been nice to know that. I don't think anybody knows, or very few people know that. I know that there's some sort of book out about our city and the parks and all these services, but go try to find the book. I only know that it exists because I happen to have picked a box up years ago from Parks and Rec. So I think there needs to be more information flow out there. The canine classes, a lot of people could use them. A lot of doggies could use them, and their owners. The other doggy parks in St. Pete are at Coquina Key, Crescent Lake, Kenwood, Lake Vista, North Shore Park, which is downtown. It's right next to the swimming area. It's a beautiful park. It's the one where everybody plays volleyball. You can see a lot of people paddleboarding off of that because it's very shallow there. It could use a little maintenance. frankly. But it's a gorgeous park, and within that, of course, is the azalea and the arboretums. They're lovely. They're really lovely. And Nina and I have walked there often, and very popular. Then Walter Fuller Prize, which I regret not taking her there. I honestly didn't know of it, but a friend, Diane, and a Facebook friend, Diane Griffin, sent me photos. She said this is where she goes with her dogs. And it looks like a lovely park. It looks very natural. I looked at the photos. I didn't see any development. I didn't see any huge, outrageous structures with things flying around on top of them. It was beautiful. It was natural. It was what a park should look like. I don't know if it's designated. I think I'm going to start looking at which parks are passive and which are active. I know Lassie Park is designated as a passive park, and that's the one on Old Southeast. It's a gorgeous park. I've gone there often. A lot of people walk their doggies along. It's got a very, very shallow sandbar. And you can look out there and see people walking their dogs up and down the sandbar. Miss Nina, of course, wouldn't go, but it was pretty cool. It's a beautiful park. It's Old Southeast. So those are the parks in St. Pete. And I want to also talk now about something else before I end. I'm ready to end. It's hard to talk for this long. So but I wanted to talk about the history of the parks. And a dear friend sent me information about how St. Pete wound up getting doggy parks. And it was the psychological advantage to an election. And Mayor Baker is the originator of doggy parks here in St. Pete. And he was looking for ways to enhance and improve the city, and of course have things to promise the voters that he would do if he were elected. And during that period, there were no doggy parks. If people walked their doggies in the streets like we all do, they could, if the dog made a mess, they could get fined. There was no place to walk your dog or to let your dog off the leash. If you let your dog off the leash in the city, you could get a fine. And some people still do that. But anyway, it's illegal. And now that there's doggy parks, there's no reason to do that. So Mayor Baker was the originator. He started looking around. He started investigating what enhances cities. And he's very research-oriented. He did always does his homework. And I like him a lot. I don't want to say this right now. I'm a Democrat. But I like Mayor Baker a lot for his thoroughness and his ability to look beyond himself to the larger picture. So he saw the idea of, somebody turned him on, some constituent turned him on and said, hey, listen, we got a real big problem here, and it's, we need doggy parks. And doggy parks? Yeah, doggy parks. And we started researching that. And when he started talking about and encouraging doggy parks, many more people attended, his election talks. I don't have all the details with me, but I know that doggy parks were created during Mayor Baker's administration. Obviously, he won the election, and one of the first things he did was to keep that promise of having doggy parks. And they had to look around. Of course, they had to look around for money. But doggy parks aren't expensive. And he started building doggy parks. And as a matter of fact, the last doggy park, I think, was built during the previous mayor, right before this one. And I think it opened. I think that's the most recent doggy park. But dogs can run free, and isn't that wonderful? So that's the history of our doggy parks. They were created because Mayor Baker looked around. He was not Mayor Baker then, but the candidate Baker looked around, said, "Hey, how can I improve the city? What can I offer that we don't have?" And when he learned about the fines and the problems and, the fact that realized how many dog owners were in the city, the fact that they couldn't let their dogs off the leash without getting into trouble, he realized the benefits to the community of having doggy parks. So there's the history. So we want to thank him. I'll thank him on right now. Thank you for the doggy parks. They're wonderful. They're clean. They're safe. And if the big guys stay out of the little guys' parks, it's perfect. And I understand now we used to have free doggy bags, but somebody cut that budget. And when I was doing my Kona leadership program, this is an aside, as I was doing my Kona leadership program, the one thing every community asked for, the one thing, was doggy bags. So the cost of doggy bags are nothing. But somebody stopped it because they said the containers were too expensive. I mean, can you believe that? Oh, it's hard to believe. Things are hard to believe at times, aren't they? So I thank you for listening. I encourage you to help us save Spa Beach Park, to go to the council meeting where they're going to vote on this on July 12th, 3 o'clock at City Hall. Let's advocate for a postponement, or obviously, if we're up to me, it wouldn't even be up for vote, it'd just be gone. But I'm also learning how this thing began, and that's a whole nother story. Many years ago, this fiasco has been chugging along under the radar. It's a remarkable length of time. We're going back almost 3 years. So there's a whole interesting story there about how this began and why it's become why there's so much push for it. So let's not contaminate our parks. If we're going to contaminate them, let's just not. Meanwhile, if you take your doggy, enjoy the doggy parks and enjoy the waterfront, which is where I see many, many people walking their dog. There's plenty of beautiful walks. And let's try to keep the commercialization of our parks down, okay? They're there for the green, not the greed, okay? Hey, that's a tagline. Green, not greed. I like it. Thanks for listening, everyone. And enjoy your weekend. It's time for me to sign off. Once again, I want to thank UPS at Second and Second for being my sponsor, for believing in me. And let's just see what a difference we can make with this issue. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.